I think that was Say It Ain't So, ska version. Hey everybody, it's Mike here from The Art of Guitar. I'm back making videos. I took about a week off after we hit 800,000 subscribers just to take a little bit of a breather, but also to concentrate on writing for my other channel, which is called The Art of Fear, and it's just scary stories and stuff that I come up with. So check it out if you want to. Subscribe because the story's coming out in about a week. Now, if you know my channel, you know that I don't often hate on things. Usually I like to talk about things that I love, things that I enjoy, but I feel like I always have to be completely honest with all of you when it comes to what I like and what I don't like, especially when it comes to different periods of my life. You know, metal and rock have always been something I loved, but when it comes to other genres of music, there were times when I liked them and other times where I despised them. And this is one of those times I despised a style of music, and that style is ska music. So the very first ska tune I can ever remember hearing was Sublime's song that has a pretty taboo title. It's called Date Rap. It was playing on the radio way back in the early 90s, and I remember just being like, what is this? It gave me that same sensation that I got when I first heard Tool or Korn. I was very perplexed by it because it just sounded so different, but I knew that I liked it. It was really intense. The horn parts just kind of came out and smacked you in the face. And I wasn't a huge horn fan. I grew up in the orchestra world, so us orchestra kids and the band kids always had this rivalry going on. But my favorite part of that song were the drums, just the way they kind of subtly speed up and down. It kind of like breathes. It has this real human feel. So my first impression of ska was very positive. I loved it. A few years later, ska blew up huge, and I ended up not liking it. I should say I actually hated it at the time. And I want to give you those 9 reasons why now and plead my case. I started hearing a lot of ska punk tunes that had horns over heavier music, and I kept thinking, horns don't belong in heavy music, you know, unless you're talking devil horns. I was just like, no, horns and distorted guitars do not go together. I was just so stubborn back then about it. The second reason I hated ska back in the 90s is because I saw the very same kids who a few years earlier got into Nirvana and Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, started to wear baggy shirts and, you know, all the grunge apparel that you could find. And they suddenly changed almost as if overnight into the pop punk / ska world. It happened so quick. They went from wearing flannel to all of a sudden wearing checkered ties, fedora hats, white socks with dress shoes. It was just so bizarre to see it happen so quick. And that's what freaked me out so much. You know, growing up in the metal world, all of us just wore black t-shirts of different metal bands, and that was a consistent throughout. But to watch people go from one fashion trend to the next, one music trend to the next, they went together usually. It was just mind-boggling for me, and I thought, man, are we all just a bunch of sheep? The third reason is that I was forced to teach ska guitar to my guitar students. About a year after I graduated, I got really serious about teaching. And all of a sudden, my students went from bringing in Nirvana CDs to these CDRs that had a bunch of ska bands on them. So I love teaching students rock. You know, I was teaching a lot of Metallica at one point. Then Nirvana and Soundgarden had some good stuff too when it comes to the guitar. But suddenly I had to teach people how to play these tiny little chords in clean sound. And it just felt very foreign to me, and I hated it for a while. Can you teach me some real big fish? And I was just like, I'm quitting. But over time, I learned to appreciate ska guitar, and it really taught me a lot. You know, it was a really cool way to teach students triads on the higher strings. Now, I'm going to sound like a real hater for the next reason, but I think I'm justified because, like I said, I grew up in the orchestra world, so I was used to people calling us orc dorks. You know, we had a lot of jocks that gave us crap when we walked down the hallway with our little violin cases. I remember this one football player actually tackling one of my friends who played violin into the lockers. That sight will never leave my memory. So here's my theory. A lot of ska kids that I knew when I was in 12th grade had this elitist attitude. And I think I know why, because it would have happened to us orchestra kids if the spotlight was suddenly on us. Because ska was suddenly big, all the kids that were used to playing in recitals, you know, all the band kids, suddenly found themselves in the spotlight, playing on the stage, like a stage a rock band would play on. So they went from basically the school band room to the stage practically overnight. And with all this new attention on them, it seemed like some of them took the bitterness of how they used to be treated and turned the ska circles into an elitist club. It felt like you had to have a membership card and you had to wear all the right clothes, you had to know all the right people. So it had a real scenester type quality to it, which I just hated. But that could be completely anecdotal, you know, just in my situation, I noticed that in my circles, but maybe you have a different story, I don't know. The fifth reason for me is huge. 1996 was probably the darkest year of my life, 96, 97, and that was when ska was really hitting its stride. And I wanted to listen to music that I vibed with, so I was more in this kind of vibration. I really connected with that kind of music. That was my vibe at the time, you know? I was angry and sad and all those dark emotions. But suddenly I was hearing a lot of this kind of stuff. Like, I don't even know what to do with that. You know, I was sitting here all depressed, and to hear that kind of upfeel just kind of wrecked it for me. It's like I was sitting in the corner crying and I wanted somebody to console me, but instead I had somebody pointing and laughing at me. That's just kind of how the music made me feel. Plus, there were a lot of ska tunes that were fun and funny at the same time. So I was thinking, music's not supposed to be funny. You know, I was used to metal and rock, so it was kind of weird. I was like, unless you're Weird Al Yankovic or Green Jello or something like that, music's supposed to be serious. You can't be having fun. What's all this craziness? And of course, I know there were a lot of serious ska tunes, but overall, I just felt like this fun, exciting vibe when it came to ska, and you can't fault somebody for liking that. I was just in a very dark place at the time. And the sixth reason is because I loved guitar my whole life. It was weird to all of a sudden see the guitar get pushed into the background of the music, playing these little tiny chords. You know, it almost felt like I could get rid of my 6th, 5th, and 4th strings, just rip them off. I don't need them to play ska, because it's a lot of this kind of stuff. So it's just like, okay, so now the guitar is just a small rhythmic component to the music. And the worst part for me was a lot of the big melodic parts and solos went to the horn players instead of the guitar. One of the biggest exceptions to that, though, is the first song I heard, once again, by Sublime. It has a sweet guitar solo in it. It's probably why I liked it so much and why I kind of got bitter later on, because I was hearing less and less music with guitar solos. And being a guitar player, that just feels wrong. I was like, how dare a trombone steal a guitar player's spotlight? The 7th reason is because ska back then seemed real one-dimensional compared to metal and rock, which had a huge dynamic range. So it went from the most intense, brutal stuff to sometimes the sweetest ballads. If you listen to some hair metal ballads, rock ballads, even some metal ballads, they can really bring it down if they want to. So there's a huge mood spectrum when it comes to that kind of music. There seemed to be 3 modes of ska. You had like the mid to slower ska, you had the upbeat ska, and then you had the heavy stuff that was more like the ska punk. And so beyond that, I really couldn't find too many examples of like a ska ballad. So because, once again, that I was really down, I was really looking for a lot of slow, moody music as well, and ska just didn't offer that. The 8th reason is that I went to a ska concert one time, and I'm used to seeing people moshing and running into each other and headbanging and doing the horns and all that kind of stuff. That was what I was used to when it came to live shows. Suddenly I saw these people doing something called skanking. Here's what it looks like. What kind of saved it for me, though, is during the concert, people would jump up and down. I was like, okay, I'm more used to that kind of vibe, but yeah, I just wasn't into the whole skanking thing. And my last reason I know I'm going to get a lot of flack for, there's going to be a lot of people, I'm sure, that loved ska back in the day that are going to say otherwise, but it really seemed like after the craze was over, 95% of the people that I knew, including students that were into ska music, just abandoned it completely. Unlike us crazy metalheads who seem to be metal for life, you know, if you ask a metalhead when they're 15 and then when they're 55, you'll probably get the same response. You know, I still love metal. I still listen to it every day. But proving that ska was a huge fad, at least in my neck of the woods, it really seemed like people just let it go. They just forgot it. They dropped it like a bad habit, like they used to say. And that made me wonder, did they ever really like it in the first place, or were they just doing it because everybody thought it was cool all of a sudden? So now the twist. Going back and listening to all the older bands that were big at the time of ska, ska punk and all that, third generation ska, I started to get some good nostalgic feelings, even though my life was really crazy back in the day when it was big. There's always good times mixed with bad times. So I started to like it, and I started to appreciate it. And I had to see it from a distance. I couldn't think of it as a metalhead who plays guitar. I had to just sit back and go, you know what? This is fun music. People had a really good time. And there's going to be a ton of people who look back and go, those were the best years of my life. So I don't want to trample on that because, I liked a lot of crazy stuff back in the 80s and 90s as well that I didn't like forever. It was just something I jumped into. Breakdancing is an example of that. Although I was able to do the windmill, so I'm proud of myself. But I did drop that one pretty quickly after I asked myself, why am I even doing this? I just couldn't see any future in breakdancing, so I went into martial arts after that. And I bet you I would have been a huge ska fan if two things were different. Number one, if I was younger when I first heard it, if I was like 13 when I first heard it, maybe it would have been my favorite form of music. Also, if I would have been in a better place in my life when it took off, if 96 was a happy year and I could look back and really connect with it in that way, I think I would have had a whole different attitude towards ska than I do. All right, so let me know if you were part of the ska scene back in the day, if you agree with some of the things I said or not. Either way, I think it'd be fun to read your comments about it, and we'll catch you all at the next video. So thank you for watching. Bye-bye.